This morning, outgoing Attorney General Loretta Lynch sat down with Politico's Anna Palmer and Jake Sherman to look back at her time leading the Justice Department. This is about 45 minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Politico Playbook co-authors Anna Palmer and Jake Sherman.
Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name's Anna Palmer. I'm here with my Playbook co-author, Jake Sherman. And we'd like to thank you all for joining us this morning for one of our last Playbook events of the year. And thank you to those tuning in on live stream and on C-SPAN for what we expect to be a very fun and exciting conversation. For this morning's program, we are thrilled to host Attorney General Loretta Lynch, who's going to join us on stage in a few minutes to talk about her time in the Obama administration and what she's most focused on in the waning days of her tenure. But before we get started with the program, I'd like to extend our special thanks to our partners at Bank of America for their tremendous support of the Playbook series for many years. And I'm going to welcome onto the stage Tony Allen, Head of Corporate Reputation for Bank of America. Thank you so much, Tony, for doing this event again.
Thanks, Tony.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. Thanks, Jake. And happy holidays to everybody. And thanks to Politico for continuing this wonderful tradition of bringing us all together. We are very excited about our partnership with Politico and the opportunity to support meaningful dialogue about our country's path forward and the responsibility we all have to ensuring its future. Today, Bank of America, as many of you know, employs 200,000 people, 40% of whom are people of color, and helps 1 out of every 2 American households and hundreds of thousands of small and local businesses. We also have a presence in 90% of the nation's top markets and maintain more than $900 billion of lending in the marketplace. I should say that we learned several years ago what happens when our success and that of our customers and clients are not aligned. And we've taken those lessons very seriously and become a better and more connected company. We call that responsible growth. It's a simple recognition that our success is directly tied to the health of the American economy and healthy American communities. For example, in 2013, Bank of America worked with Social Finance Incorporated and the New York State government by providing $13.5 million in capital for a social impact bond aimed at reducing the cycle of reincarceration. That capital was provided as a part of a 5.5-year program for Pay for Success and provided reentry and employment services to 2,000 formerly incarcerated individuals in the New York City and Rochester area. For us, that's responsible growth, a driving belief that growing responsibly, supporting communities we serve, and aligning our interests with that of the American people, by definition, make us a stronger and healthier organization. It's in that spirit that it's both our honor and our important responsibility to be in this conversation today and for many years to come. Thank you very much.
Thanks, thank you.
Thank you, Tony, and thanks to Bank of America again. Now, before we get started, we want to remind everyone to tweet your questions using the hashtag. I have an iPad and I know how to use it. Playbook Breakfast is the hashtag, and we'll track them here on stage. Now, without further delay, the guest of honor, please join us in welcoming Attorney General Loretta Lynch.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we are thrilled to start this conversation, and in true Playbook tradition, we have a little bit of news at the top, which we always like. You were sworn as an Attorney General on April 27th, 2015.
Yes.
You traveled shortly thereafter to Baltimore in the aftermath of Freddie Gray's death. Since then, you've led the Civil Rights Division, had released a report. The City of Baltimore, the Baltimore Police Department have been working on reforming the process. You have an update here today about where things stand.
Yes. Well, as you noted, I think that when you look at the work that we've been able to do on policing issues, Baltimore really represents the arc of that work, the issues and the challenges. It was the first issue that confronted me. The day I was sworn in was the day of Freddie Gray's funeral, the night the violence broke out. I briefed the president on that issue that afternoon, and my first trip as AG was to Baltimore to meet with residents, elected officials, young people, and also rank-and-file police officers. We had been working with Baltimore prior to that in what's called collaborative reform, where the police department reached out to us and said, can you give us some help on our excessive force policies and the like. We'd been working on that, but after Freddie Gray's death and those attendant events, it was clear that more was needed and that the bond was truly broken there in Baltimore. And so we initiated an investigation into whether or not Baltimore Police Department was engaged in a pattern or practice of unconstitutional behavior. That report, as you know, came out this fall. We did note the areas of significant concern that we had involving stop and frisk, involving excessive force, particularly in the minority community. And so we have been working with the city and with the police department, I have to say, not just the police chief, but the police union. And we have been working with the city towards achieving a consent decree there. I'll be traveling to Baltimore in early January to provide an update on the efforts there and hopefully an announcement on those efforts, but we are moving forward there. We've been working with the city for some time now. We've been providing them information as well as technical assistance, and so at this point the ball's in the city's court, but we are looking forward to getting a positive response from them on finalizing this consent decree and making sure that everyone in Baltimore has the constitutional policing that all citizens deserve.
Maybe explain, why is a consent decree so important?
So what we call a consent decree really is an agreement between the government and the city that is filed in court. And it is court enforceable. It usually involves a monitor. And it's good for both parties because it sets forth the framework of what the city has to do. It sets forth the benchmarks that the city has to meet. And it talks about the help and the cooperation and collaboration that the Department of Justice has to provide as well in terms of assistance, training. It outlines what the monitor does. And it's supervised by a neutral third party, by a federal judge. So it survives if there's a change in administration. At the city level. It survives if there's a change or a turnover in who's handling the case at the Department of Justice level, or if the police chief retires, for example. We've been working well with this police chief, but if he were to move on for whatever reason, the framework would still be there, so his successor would have the tools that he needs. More to the point, everyone's held accountable. Everyone's held accountable to a neutral, objective standard. And so having that court enforceability is key and it's vital, particularly in Baltimore, where so much of the problem is not just the reality of the misconduct that we found, but the perception and the feeling on the part of so many citizens in Baltimore, not just the minority community, but people who perceive the Baltimore Police Department as not listening to them or to anyone. So having that layer of accountability, frankly, helps all parties in this.
Let me ask you, you told us backstage you visited, you were on a 12-city police tour.
Yes.
What was the most surprising thing you learned in those 12 cities?
You know, what I would say is it wasn't so much a surprise as things we were able to amplify. When I went on the tour, I picked cities that had been where Baltimore was, that had been where Ferguson was, not just with a problem, but a case, mistrust, riots even, or violence. And I wanted to find locations where, in the years after that, law enforcement and community residents had come together and crafted solutions. Because my view has always been, based on my 20 years as a prosecutor, is that when people sit down together and focus at the local level on what's really important to every community, they can find solutions. So I felt that those solutions were out there. And actually, I was very gratified to see cities that had been in, I would say, dire straits, where the department had filed a lawsuit, for example, in East Haven, Connecticut, and set forth a monitorship and gave the police department and the community the structure to work together. And to go there and find that residents there, as opposed to literally living in fear of the police, now welcome them into their businesses. Their children know the police. I had to hear police officers say, I have been reconnected with why I joined this profession. You know, I now feel that I am actually helping people as opposed to just patrolling an area and keeping things down. So to see that progress and to talk about that and to be able to share that across the country with communities that are trying to find ways to build the same bridges was what I hoped to do, and I was very gratified to find it. I also looked at 6 cities that exemplified really, really great success with the pillars of the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing. A lot of change in law enforcement, a lot of change in what we're asking police departments to do, particularly in terms of things like training. You know, so to see the types of de-escalation training that's happening in many police departments across the country is really gratifying. The challenge is, how do we build that to scale? How do we make it available to the 18,000 police departments across the country who want that same skill, you know, who want essentially everyone to go home alive from a police interaction?
So let's pivot a little bit to things, some things in the news right now. We've been bombarded the last couple days with questions about the integrity of our election system. Everybody is seeing these headlines. What could you say the government is doing to ensure that our election system is fair and is on the level?
Well, this is an ongoing process. I mean, we've been talking about this now for some time, since the summer when we began the investigation into the hacks of the DNC and the DCCC, and trying to ascertain who was behind that. You know, there's a number of things that we do, a lot of which we talk about publicly, a lot of which we don't talk about publicly in terms of just investigation and the responses that we have. This was of grave concern to us, so we began in the summer to look at what we could say publicly about this issue, and that's why you saw the intelligence community release its statement in October, a month before the election, letting the American people know that the intelligence community had determined that Russia was behind the hacks themselves. The investigation is ongoing. Certainly the review is continuing, but you know, we rarely do that kind of public attribution. But it was important in this instance because the election affects everyone. And it isn't even a matter of the results, it's people's faith in the system and the faith in the integrity of the system. At the same time, the Department of Homeland Security was very actively engaged in reaching out to every state to make sure that they had access to every resource they needed to protect the state electoral system as well. And fortunately, we didn't see the sort of technical interference that I know people had concerns about also in terms of voting machines and the like. But a lot of education went on about that, a lot of training went on about that, and a significant number of states did reach out to DHS and talk with them about those issues. And so we thought that was an important step as well, to make sure that every state knew they could work with us. And as you know, the President has ordered a review of this issue going back several elections, not just 2016, but 2012, 08. We know that campaigns were hacked in 08. For example, cybersecurity is a concern across the administration. This is an area in which we're trying to be as public and transparent as possible, but there are things that are going to happen that people are not going to know about because of the nature of the tools, the techniques, the classification, things like that.
Can you react at all, and I don't know if you can, but to the reports that are out today that Putin himself knew that was involved in the hacking?
So I would refer you to the intelligence community and to the reports that have been put forth so far. I can tell you that with respect to the review that the President has ordered, we won't be talking about that until it is finalized. There will be briefings, as is very commonly the case. We brief the Hill. We brief the Hill in a classified manner, unclassified manner as well. And whatever we can make public, we will make public also.
So you talked about some of the progress that had been made on policing this tour. One of the other kind of hallmarks or big things that you've been involved in as Attorney General has been inclusion and equality, kind of in workplace and schools. Can you talk a little bit about what you think your greatest achievement is there and what maybe work is left to be done?
Well, I think the work is ongoing. I think I was fortunate enough to be able to pick up some great work that was already being done at the Department of Justice and also in many communities. You know, a lot of the work that we do is inspired by what's happening out in the country. People speaking up, people saying, you know, I have concerns, I have fears even, and reaching out to us for help. So I've been tremendously proud to empower local communities to address these issues, to talk about these issues, to expand knowledge and information about these issues. A lot of what we're seeing, certainly in terms of the general inchoate fear and separation of many communities, I think comes about when people don't understand each other. So to the extent that we can help with that, that's been a very positive thing. But when it comes down to the specific instances where people act on those fears, we have seen a very troubling rise in hate crimes, as you may know.
67%, right?
67% increase in hate crimes directed against Muslim Americans in 2015 alone. That's based on the recent data released by the FBI about a month ago. And what we're seeing, although we haven't tabulated 2016 yet, we are seeing an increase in reports to the FBI and DOJ from the Muslim American community about incidents of hate crimes, of bullying, of incidents in schools as well. And so this is a very disturbing trend to us. We also have seen, the numbers also show stark increases and high numbers of violence directed against our LGBT family members and friends, particularly transgender individuals, particularly transgender women of color. The homicide rate there is the highest among any group that I've seen in recent memory. So we're talking about groups that have felt on the outside and that are being pushed even further on the outside. So we're spending a lot of time talking about the department's efforts in those fields, the cases that we're bringing, the outreach that we're doing, but also making sure that people know that the Department of Justice is still here. Is still here. We're still working on these issues. That work will continue, but they also have to make sure that it continues in their own communities.
Do you attribute that directly to the election?
I think there's a whole host of forces,
including the election,
that lead to that. I think that whenever there's a situation that generates divisive rhetoric, we see these increases. I mean, obviously, people point to the biggest spike was after 9/11, the biggest spike until now, of course. And we had a lot of voices calling for calm and calling for consideration of our citizens. But it did happen. And so you will also see, for example, when we do, when I was a prosecutor in Brooklyn and we would do a large national security or terrorist case, you would see a backlash in the local community. You'd see an increase in bullying in school. So there's a host of factors that contribute to this. But certainly whenever there's divisive rhetoric, whenever there's fear that's promulgated as something to be used, that increases not just the concern in groups, but it also seems to spur people to take action. And that's unfortunate. I think that's the problem that we are seeing. But I also think that people, the rise in hate crimes, as we know, it goes back to 2015. So there's clearly a host of reasons behind that, and that's what we got to deal with.
What criminal justice reform is something where you guys have not made a lot of legislative process. You've done some things administratively, but why? I mean, when we're up on the Hill and we're talking to people like Paul Ryan and Republicans kind of across the spectrum, they say this is a top priority of theirs. So why hasn't the administration been able to rally a package on the Hill?
Well, there's been tremendous bipartisan support for criminal justice reform that still holds people accountable, but does so in a way that that lets prosecutors deal with people as individuals, that lets us use the mandatory minimums in the way in which they were meant, and gives us discretion to deal with people according to their individual situation, that also lets us deal with the tremendous financial burden that over-incarceration places on our system, as well as the collateral consequences in our communities. I've had very positive discussions with members in the House and the Senate on both sides of the aisle on this issue. I will tell you that I think if I had the answer as to why we were not able to achieve congressional action on any one particular issue, my book would be out next week.
But when is your book?
And so look, I've been in this town now almost 2 years, and I think that there was a great momentum for reform there. There was really thoughtful discussions, as I said, on both sides of the aisle on these issues, pulling from states that were providing great examples. My home state of North Carolina, Texas, for example, are providing great examples of how to deal with both the human cost and the financial cost. It did not come together. It did not come together, and it's something that I sincerely hope the next Congress will take up in the same spirit of looking at what is best for this country and the criminal justice system as a whole.
We had Valerie Jarrett on a panel last week for Politico's Women Rule Summit, and she said criminal justice reform was one of her biggest disappointments of something that didn't get done. Talk to us, I mean, are there things that, the unfinished business that you really wished you would have been able to get done during your time as AG?
So, you know, my view is that you have these wonderful positions for a season. You know, and you know that going in. So I came in knowing that there would be an arc of work that I was picking up and that would continue long after I left. So it isn't so much for me a matter of disappointment and not being able to achieve things as trying to highlight the things and the tremendous progress we have been able to make. We mentioned, for example, we weren't able to get criminal justice reform writ large. We've been able to do some really, really great work. On the policing front, one of the issues that we talked about in that area a lot has been data collection, making sure that we know how to tabulate instances of police misconduct, how to tabulate instances of excessive force. Finding consistent ways to discuss that issue is key to policing reform. And so that's an area where we've made tremendous progress. We're going to be releasing tomorrow, actually, our protocol for the federal government's response to the Death in Custody Act. We've got to report those. We're also, in January, going to open up our pilot project where we're going to have, for the first time, national consistent efforts on reporting of law enforcement excessive force. That's going to be a huge boon. So I look at the things that we have been able to accomplish, and sometimes you don't get it done in the larger forum of Congress or the Hill, but you're able to get it done in a different way. And that's been very gratifying to me, to be able to say, yes, we did this. We actually did accomplish this.
You talk about your work after, or the work of the Justice Department after you leave office. And so that's a perfect segue to ask you about your presumed successor, Jeff Sessions, senator from Alabama. Do you have a personal relationship with him?
I have met Senator Sessions during my confirmation process. He's a member of the Judiciary Committee, so we have spoken on several occasions about the issues of the day, and so, you know, I certainly know the senator. And
so you disagree with him on most issues, it would be fair to say?
So, you know, I don't think that I'm not really here to speculate about which way he's going to take the department. And people ask me that a lot. And I think every attorney general is going to have to answer those questions for him or herself. And every attorney general is going to have to be held accountable for how they lead the department. And for that, you know, I've always had and felt that my relationship with the press has been important in that. I certainly think that the Fourth Estate is a key figure in uncovering the priorities of not just the next AG, but anyone who's going to be setting policy in the administration. And so I look forward to watching you guys continue to have that debate.
We look forward to doing it.
We will be there. Well, talk to us, I mean, maybe more broadly, though. I mean, are there concerns that you have with the direction that Trump has signaled for his next administration, whether it be sometimes using, you know, facts and figures that aren't actually accurate, such as right now, this is the safest time in this country's history, but he is saying that the murder rate has spiked. I mean, does that kind of alarm you at all, or are you concerned about that?
So, you know, I think that again, I think every administration is going to have to find their footing on these issues. I have always found facts to be of great help in doing that. And I think the benefit of actually being in office is that you do have access to a great wealth of information. And I hope that whoever's in my chair or any of the chairs that are going to be setting policy will take advantage of that and avail themselves of that, as well as listen to people, who have done this work. You know, I know that people ask about how the Department of Justice will change or shift. You know, and every AG and every administration sets their own policies and priorities. But there is a beating heart of this department that's composed of career people who are dedicated to its mission, who are committed to justice, who are committed to independence of the Department of Justice within any administration, and they stay on. They stay on and they guide the ship. And so I have great faith in them. I have tremendous faith in them. But I have tremendous faith in the American people. People come to us and they raise issues and they raise concerns and they say, we want DOJ involved in that. I take that trust very, very seriously. That's not going to change. People have come together over issues in ways we haven't seen since the civil rights movement of the 60s. You know, we have not seen, in my recollection, the diversity of people protesting various issues that we've seen. You know, people who are marching in the streets, whether it's a policing issue, whether it's in support of a proposal, The groups are young, they're old, they're multiracial. So we've seen a greater level of understanding and empathy in this country than we've had in a long time. That is a very powerful tool. That is a very, very powerful tool, and it can be used to make people's voices heard. And that's what people have to do. You know, every government has to be held accountable. This administration inclusive. You know, myself inclusive as well. So I've always welcomed that. And I think it will continue. I also tell people, don't forget the local level. Don't forget your local prosecutors. Don't forget your local government. You know, talk to them and say, we need laws that are responsive to us, that are protective of us, that are evocative of the founding ideals of this country, which is that everyone has a right to participate in America, no matter where you live, no matter what you look like, no matter whom you love, no matter how you pray. That's the foundation of what we do. And we're the ones who can never forget that.
One of the issues that Donald Trump has brought up is deporting, at various times, various statements about deporting undocumented people from this country. You told Rachel Maddow, I believe this week, you sat down with her, that you couldn't do anything to protect undocumented folks en masse. There was no kind of blanket action you could take. Is there anything this administration can do in the last days, in the last couple of weeks here, to address an issue that the president and you and various people in the administration have spent lots of time on?
So the question before me was whether or not there could be pardon.
Right.
A pardon of a group of people, the dreamers, the young people who came here and are working here, in school here, and are contributing to our society, as every immigrant group has done since the beginning of this country. And as I said then, the issue of pardoning someone is an individual decision that's made on a case-by-case basis. And so there's no legal framework or regulatory framework that allows for a pardon of a group en masse. That being said, you know, this was a decision that this administration came to based upon looking at the situation of these young people, looking at how they had contributed to society, looking at their records, looking at their dreams and their goals, and looking at how that was consistent with the ideals of this country. And so people have got to continue to make that case. They've got to continue to raise those voices at all levels of government, not just DOJ, Department of Homeland Security, but make sure that people who are coming into these positions understand the importance of the policy that led to them. Look, I don't know what the future holds, and there's no guarantees in life, but that's always been the case. That has never stopped people from working hard on these issues before, and it cannot stop them now.
So you talk a little bit about continuity, right, of the people who've been working on these issues, whether it's DACA or other things. What would you say to some of the career officials who I think are really having a soul-searching moment of whether they should stay in government and are concerned about Trump? What's your advice to them?
And not only at DOJ, right? I mean, we hear from people
across
the government who are wondering if this is something they could do for the next 4 years.
Well, I think everyone's got to make that decision for themselves based upon the nature of their work, you know, what they're called upon to engage in and how. What I will say is that I've been fortunate enough, I've been a prosecutor now for over 20 years, and I've served in a number of, well, I served in several different administrations. And so I think people have to look and see, are they able to carry on the work that is of import to them? And I think they will find that in many, many ways they will be able to do that. And the work of protecting the American people, the work of protecting the environment, the work of reviewing the business community and looking at those cases and making those decisions, that does go on. That will go on. The cases that the Department of Justice brings, both in the criminal side, the civil side, environmental, as I mentioned, and other ways, that work will continue. And I think that people, if you focus, as I always have tried to do, one of the best pieces of advice I ever got when I was a young prosecutor was, it's not about you. It's about the people that you're sworn to protect. And what can you do to carry out that mission in the most effective way? And so I think people have got to look at it that way. But they'll make different decisions. You know, people will move on to other challenges. They will take their mission to other venues, other forums, and that's part of government life also. That's something that I think is going to be a tremendous benefit to people who are working on issues of importance in the field. There's a number of people who have spent time thinking about these important policy issues and pulling all these different voices together to make a unified push for change is going to be carrying that forth into the private sector is a tremendous benefit to everyone. It expands the thinking, it expands the discourse. So I think people are going to find a number of ways to contribute, whether they stay in their agencies or not.
And one of the things that the president has gotten throughout his administration has gotten a lot of attention for is commuting sentences or pardoning offenders. Some people have called for, and my colleague Josh Gerstein pointed this out to me, blanket commutation for drug offenders. Is that something that you would recommend or that you think is an appropriate action?
So what I'll say is that we obviously have been doing a great deal of work on the President's Clemency Initiative for several years now, and very, very gratified the President has taken the recommendation of the Department of Justice. Although I will tell you, he reviews every file himself.
Does he call you about a lot of them?
These are very individual decisions. There's a whole line of people who contribute to this, and so it's very, very well thought out. The recommendations that DOJ makes, as well as the review in the White House and of the President. And I think that when you're talking about clemency, the same as with pardons, it's a very individualized decision. I think it will be hard to craft a system for a blanket commutation of a class of people, because what we've done is look at it as, let's look at these situations where, people have been held accountable for their behavior. This is not some sort of blanket approval for what got them there in the first place, but how have they handled themselves while they're incarcerated? What length of sentence did they receive? Is it a sentence that they would likely have received today in how we look at these types of offenses? And just being very careful about how we review these matters. I said that with a great deal of, obviously, with respect to Josh Gerstein, who's a tremendous asset of yours at the Department of Justice. He works well with us, and we're happy to have him there, of course.
We're happy to have him too.
So, as well as all the members of the media who work with us, I think it's an important role that you play. So I still believe that as we look at how we have tried to make the entire criminal justice system not only more efficient but more fair, the focus has been on giving prosecutors the discretion that they need to provide individualized accountability for people, to give them the tools and flexibility that they need to make sure that people are held accountable, but in a way that's consistent with their role in the offense. And that's the same theory that carries forward into how we review clemency and pardons.
What is your relationship like with Obama? I mean, how much are you talking to him on a regular basis?
Take us behind the scenes and tell us something. You're both lawyers, right? So you both are very smart people, graduated Harvard Law School. Tell us about his process.
Well, what I can tell you is that it is very gratifying to work for a president who is thoughtful, who considers issues deeply, who cares deeply about the human and personal side of every issue, certainly that I have presented before him or that I've seen him discuss in groups large and small. It is tremendously gratifying to have a president who supports the independence of the Department of Justice and values our input and our guidance on issues like clemency and pardons. And it's tremendously gratifying to have a president, as I said, who I think the bedrock of every issue he considers is how will this help the American people? And so those discussions mean that, having that in those discussions mean that you're always going beyond just, what can we do here and give me the legal answer, but it's how will this help? What will it mean? What difference will it make in the lives of people? I've watched him hold meetings on policing issues, for example, with community members, with law enforcement leaders, with elected officials, and everyone in the room had a chance to speak and felt listened to, and everyone's voice was taken into account in the final version of work that we all turned to later. And so I think that's been a tremendous asset, certainly to me as a cabinet member. I think it is something that the American people have benefited from greatly. That you could never have someone who cares too much, but is also willing to make the hard decisions and to look at policy and say, not just why is this how we've done it before for years, but why are we doing it this way? Is it the right way to do this, and is it the right thing to do?
Sorry, go ahead, Anna.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, you talk about the independence of the Justice Department. the Justice Department took a pretty big role in the 2016 election.
More than you would like, I imagine.
Jim Comey, the FBI director who technically reports to you, discussed the investigation into one of the candidates, Hillary Clinton, weeks before the election. Do you think he impacted the election?
You know, I'm going to have to leave that to the analysts and the pundits to review, because I think there's a lot of study going on about a whole host of factors in this election, because so many things that I think people viewed from a statistical advantage point, for example, turned out to be different. And so there'll be a lot of discussion about that. There'll be a lot of analysis about that. You know, I certainly am not in a position to say at this point what weighed in one way or the other. So I'll let people analyze that. What I can say about the whole matter is that throughout the consideration of the investigation that was under discussion there, we took great steps to try and make sure that the independent team of career prosecutors and agents were able to do their work freely, without any interference from anyone, really, and just make their recommendations, and we reported those out. And so there are times, I think, when people try and be more transparent than we often are about that, and provide more information about that so that people can understand the process. You know, and how that worked out, I think, has also been played out in the public discourse to a great degree. So I'll leave that for the analysts to decide as well.
Do you wish, though, that he hadn't said anything, or do you have any thoughts about that? You know,
I don't go back at this point. I think we have to look and see what have we learned from that in terms of handling these matters going forward.
Is there any after-action report that the Justice Department is doing into how that was handled? Because it was, I mean, whether it impacted the election, I guess, is up for debate, right? But is there any after-action report on just how everything went down?
Yeah, I wouldn't go into what we're doing in terms of reports or writings or discussions. You know, I don't do that in general. So I won't comment on that for this matter as well. But what I can say is that, you know, the focus has been and always was and will continue to be on making sure that it's the work of the department that is the issue. And that the career people there who work on these matters are the ones who are going to be giving us the information that we need to make the final decisions.
We're going to get the hook in a couple minutes, so I want to talk to you about kind of reflect. What has surprised you most about this job? You've, as a career prosecutor, somebody who's been around this line of work for a long time, about the top job. What has been the most surprising thing?
Yeah, you know, I'm not so sure that it's. I think
you expected it all, right?
No, well, there's no way you can anticipate everything that happens in the day of the life of the Attorney General. And people ask me to describe my day. Every day is so different, but every day is so incredibly rewarding. You know, the people that I get to work with, from the intelligence community, from the law enforcement agencies that are part of the department, from the local law enforcement agencies that we work with so closely. So what I would say is I wouldn't say it's a surprise, but what's been most gratifying is to see, even though I was a U.S. attorney in the field, but to see the larger role of the department in the lives of the American people. That's been tremendously gratifying, to be able to go out to the West Coast and talk to local law enforcement officers who are on a human trafficking task force with the FBI, for example, and talk about the grant money that we give them and hear them say what a difference it has made in the human trafficking victims they've been able to rescue. You know, to hear that and to see that has been wonderful. To talk to prosecutors across the country from different offices who have different issues and priorities maybe than my old office, and hear and see that same dedication has been just incredibly gratifying. To be able to talk to local law enforcement agencies and provide them with body cameras, for example, and hear them say what a difference it has made in policing on the streets, in how they interact with civilians, and watch them interact with young people. To talk to a police department about setting up a youth advisory council and then come back to them several months later and say, you know, and they say, you know, we did that. And it has helped us. It has changed the way in which we police, and we now know the kids, and we have a positive relationship with more of the youth. To see that kind of work going on gives me tremendous faith in this country, in the American people, in people who care about these issues. And as the Attorney General, to be able to see the results of the policies that you put in place has been outstanding.
What is, obviously you're focused on the last remaining days of your tenure, but what's next for you? Will you be staying in Washington? Can you give us any preview about, where you'll be?
Or you like
in
everybody
January?
else? And
Taking some big vacation somewhere, turning your phone off, never to answer.
So, well, at this point, we are committed to running through the tape, as the president has asked us. And as you can see, we still have a host of things that we're working on and that we're looking to resolve in the weeks ahead. And we're confident that we can do that. And continuing raising the important issues that we've been working on. Like so many people, I will be decompressing for a while after the administration is over, and then deciding where to go and what to do. But one of the benefits also of being the Attorney General is seeing the tremendous variety of commitment out there in the field and knowing that I'll be able to continue working on these issues that are important to me.
What is the single thing, the decompression? Are you going to turn your BlackBerry off and not answer for a day?
Are you going to throw it in an ocean somewhere? Like I feel like doing some days.
Look, I'm not going to encourage the destruction of property. I've just got to say.
Especially not company property.
Maybe not before January 20th. so I can't encourage that sort of thing. It's like, I will just be decompressing and having some quiet time and then deciding what to do next. But when I was when I left the administration before I ended up staying in New York, was able to work on a number of things that were of great importance to me in terms of public service. And there's so many wonderful things that people can do, and I'm looking forward to exploring that as well.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much, Attorney General, for sharing us your unique story and kind of thoughts about the accomplishments and what is left to come at the DOJ. Thank you, all of you for joining us here in our audience and on the live stream on C-SPAN. And thank you once again to Bank of America for your tremendous partnership of the Playbook series. And we hope to see you again tomorrow afternoon back here for our last Playbook event of the year, where we have cocktails. Everybody have a great day. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Pick this up.